Ecopoetics and the singular. Two brilliant poets with their insightful work on Andal, Kalidasa and the Bhagavad Gita. This interaction is going to be deep, thought-provoking and memorable. They'll hold us enthralled with an in-depth chat on ecopoetics, its form and its relevance, presenting Priya, Sarukkai, Chabria and Mani Rao.
Here to focus on Priya's book, Sing of Life. This is what it looks like. But at the outset, I'd like to say there are a few other poets here who have more overtly written on ecopoetics. Sudeep has an entire book focusing on the theme, Sudeep Sen. And Vinita Agrawal is like onto her second anthology on the theme. So that's really important for us to acknowledge and to know that. But Priya has actually done a revisioning of Rabindranath Tagore's Gitanjali. And it's not a translation. It's like a recasting through her own voice into a more intense form. And we're going to jump into that in a moment. Now, when most people say ecopoetics, they're talking about the effect of the human activity on the environment, the disastrous effects, and the concern for how to reverse that process or how to slow down that process, how to have more holistic practices. But the underlying impetus actually is that of an interconnectedness between all forms of life and the understanding that the nature is a part of us, it's in us and outside us. And that is really sort of like the inner vision of Tagore's writing, as well as what Priya has brought to the fore in her book. So the second aspect that I would like to highlight for us is that it's not just so much about the sense of gratitude, love, and oneness with nature, but it's also that Tagore has a very singular vision. There is a strong sense of the presence of a higher being, a higher power, and also a personal relationship with it or he or she. Actually, in his case, it's he. He says father. So we will talk a little bit about that. So Priya, anyway, can you just dive into it and give us a sense of, read us some poetry, tell us a little bit about the ecopoetics vision behind it, and so on. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to say it's marvelous to have Mani Rao with me. I think she's one of the most luminous poets and translators in the country. Wow. And it's a real joy and honor to be with her on stage. And I'm also very happy to be here at the Bengaluru Poetry Festival because I see it's buzzing. I think it's great to have a festival dedicated to poetry. And I want to thank all those people sitting there who have been so helpful to me when, you know, we've had an overflowing of poetry, and with that overflowing, I was kind of waiting, and I had all my friends come around and help me, so my thanks to you too. And coming to eco-poetry, which we're talking about, we very well know that the term was not coined when Tagore lived, but what I found out when I went into Tagore was he is considered a guru who heralded the sense of ecopoetics. One of the gurus right there, and that was very, very, it was a vision for me to see that, because what I see in his poetry is exactly what Mani was saying, this interconnectedness of all life, and more than singularity, I would say sacredness, the sacredness of all life, and we'll talk about that. Now, you know, what Tagore does is two things. He cuts you off and he binds you. He cuts you off from commercialism, clutter, crap, if I may use a word, and he binds you to your deep ancestral roots with the earth, with sacredness. So he's mooring and unmooring you. And in this vision that he throws out to us, what we see is that the human is diminished. And that, I find, is such a relief, you know, because you are connected, you are part of a greater whole. But before I say more, let me read you a poem, and then I'll give you my definition of ecopoetics. What I've done with the book, what I've done with Tagore's Gitanjali is, I think, a tribute. I have not substituted any of my words. I have not interpolated. I have not changed Tagore's word order, but I have condensed them. And out of his 103 prose poems, I've made 2 poems out of each of those. And these are what I would call fungal translations, in the sense that not only did he translate himself from the Bengali into the English, fungal translations, as you know, are radical transformations of form. And this is what has happened in these poems. It's also a palimpsest, because he wrote those poems and then he rewrote them, and I've rewritten them in single life. And of course, it's a collage because the poems float all over the page. And you can have your own reasons why poems float, why words float, why the sense of spirit floats. And it was rapture which brought me here. So I will talk now about Song 2, my version of Tagore. To sing, it seems my heart would break. All that is harsh and dissolute melts, spreads wings across the sky. My song reaches the joy of singing. Tears, sweet harmony, glad bird on its flight across the sea. Drunk, drunk, I forget myself. Now, when we say ecopoetics, there's a certain meaning to it. It is a search for the spiritual, for the sacred, but it is a secular sacredness. And in ecopoetics, you know, we use scientific language. It is a melding of science and poetry with a reverence for the earth. Tagore didn't quite use one of the favorite words of ecopoetry now, mycelium or root hairs, but you see his vision here. This is 65. Listen to eternal harmonies. The world weaves words in my mind. Joy adds music. This overflowing cup of my life. Love, feel your sweetness in me. And 81. I grieve over lost time, but it is never lost. Take every moment of my life, hidden in the heart of things. Seeds sprout, buds blossom, ripening fruit flower. I was sleeping and imagined work had ceased. In the morning, I found my garden full of wonders. I awoke. So, what I'd like to do here is actually throw it open a little more, and I'd like to ask Mani about, you know, your vision of Kalidas. As you know, she translates from the Sanskrit. She's translated Kalidas. She's translated the Gita. And watch out for her new book, Saundarya Lahari.
Talking about your book now, okay?
well, and she's also a Vedic and a scholar of the Vedas and Tantra. So what I'd like to know from you, Mani, really, no, and all I've said is true, is Kalidasa's vision, you know, of nature and how it could possibly tie up with this vision which Tagore is also offering us and ecopoetry is offering us. Are there threads?
You know, a lot of people talk about nature poetry. Like, what do you write? I write nature poetry. Like, I appreciate flowers and I appreciate bees and things like that. And especially those who have not read Kalidasa know of him as, oh, nature poet, because they know there is Abhignana Shakuntalam and there's something to do with forest and stuff. But in fact, when he compares human beauty to nature, it feels like, to me, like actually the nature is the higher beauty. He's comparing feminine form, sometimes to flowers, trees, branches, but it's like the flowers, trees, branches, and vines are the ideal. You know, it's quite,
Right.
you get that feeling. The other thing is that they're not separate from nature. People are a part of it, you know. So when Shakuntala leaves the hermitage, the trees are weeping, you know.
That's
In
so beautiful.
Meghadutam, you find this yaksha who is this kind of mad for his beloved. He is talking to this cloud, you know. It sort of seems a bit besotted and also fantasy oriented, like who's going to do that, like talk to a cloud. At the same time, it's the kind of world where that can happen, you know. So you can call it nature poetry, eco-poetics, you know, whatever language you want to call it, but that's the vision in Kalidasa. But I don't think there's like a very kind of like a singular kind of address, but like if you compare it with Tagore.
Well, you use the word besotted, and I think most poets are besotted. And so I definitely agree with that. And as for the sense of nature, I think what I find in Tagore, and I think there is also that in earlier poetry, you also find it in Bhakti, in Sufi poetry, it is this, let me use the Sanskrit word, sama darshan. Sama, same, darshan, sight. The same non-hierarchical sight. This is a concept which I absolutely adore and want to live by. And the other thing is, the other concept maybe is Sridaya, which is meditativeness, mindfulness, listening with an intelligent heart. So these concepts, I think, run through Kalidasa also, and
There's some poetry that
and definitely too, through to Sing of Life. Let me just tell you how I worked this out by saying one thing. You know, earlier you had asked me this question when we were talking, Mani. You said, but you see, he talks about the face of God, remember? Now he does talk about the face of God. And I'll just read to you poem number 5 from Tagore, okay? Poem number 5 from Tagore makes precise mention of the face of God. This is it. I ask for a moment's indulgence to sit by thy side. The works I have in hand, I will finish afterwards. Away from the sight of thy face, my heart knows no rest, nor respite, and my work becomes an endless toil in the shoreless sea of toil. Today, the summer has come to my window with its sighs and murmurs, and the bees are plying their minstrelsy at the court of the flowering grove. Now it is time to sit quiet, face to face with thee, and to sing dedication of life in this silent and overflowing leisure. This is Tagore writing in, translating this in 1912, okay? And here is my take 100 years later. The same song, 5. I ask for a moment. The works I have in hand, I will finish. My heart knows no rest. My work becomes endless in a shoreless sea. Summer has come to my window. The bees, the flowering grove. Time to sit still, face to face, to sing of life in silent leisure. Sing of life overflowing
You know, so interesting how Priya has removed the thee and the thou from Tagore. Wherever he says father, you know, in India we don't, what is father, you know? We know mother, amma and ma, but there's no like father for the divine. I mean, I only think of Pitama, which is like not really nothing to do with the divine father. It's like a worldly grandparent, right? So, do you think he was like there's a Christian overtone, or was he talking to a particular different audience and he was writing in English for a different audience? And now, do you think you've like brought back the essence of like the inner vision of Tagore? And may I just say one more thing? See, I had always thought of Tagore as where the mind is without fear, and I decided only that one thing, and I never really realized how much and how vast Gitanjali was. I maybe have read maybe 3 or 4 things from it, and this book really opened it for me. And I think sometimes the success of a translation is you want to go back to the original after reading it. And when I saw this and I saw how intense it was, and I found that all of Gitanjali is at the back, and I started reading it and I thought, wow, I didn't know this about Tagore. I mean, I've read his short stories in translation, but I had no idea that this is so lyrical and just so, it just feels so wholesome. And like, wholesome is the wrong word. That's a boring word. I don't know.
Shall we say
Convert it
fullness?
to a more interesting word, huh?
Fullness. Okay, we're disagreeing here.
Something, but you know, I think you have done that. You've
Thank
brought
you.
back the essence in a sense, but you've removed the father and the thee and the thou and recast it. And
Yeah.
Samadarshan, that the same life, this, in one of the poems you go, the same life, the same life, the same life, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, for me, the thee, thou, etc., not only was it archaic, it was addressing a high godly figure. And all through the day, we've had sessions on the sacred in one way or the other, speaking about God in the neighborhood. Now, here, I think for me to go was perhaps addressing himself, addressing the view around him. And it is, to me, the Gitanjali is a poem where he's really speaking with himself, and therefore it is very intense, intimate, and therefore it reaches out to everyone.
Why is do you think the world is missing in it? Like, it's just all so vague and so abstract.
I don't think, I
No,
mean, for me,
is it missing?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think it's missing at all. I think that you open up the view by, removing the thee, thou.
Okay.
That to me is like a filter. It's, you have to see through that prism. Remove the prism.
Wasn't it at a particular point in his life when he wrote it? Like, there's that beautiful poem where he addresses death and he says, "When you come, I will welcome you." That's one of my favorite poems in it. Doesn't he? Is that a specific biographical detail there?
Absolutely. I mean, let's remember he's translating this from the Bengali, and he's writing these poems when he's, going through the illness and death of 4 of his family members. So death is very much on his mind, the darkness of it, but also amazing courage, where he says, I will go and meet it. I offer my life on the altar. I am prepared. So there is this tremendous vision of, I will use the word fullness, and I will use the word gratitude towards life for all that it has given him, which takes it forward. I think this is the running theme of the Gitanjali.
Would you read some more? And also, if it's possible, tell us that moment when you discovered that you want to do this work, please.
Well, I'll answer the second part first. I never know what I'm going to work on next. It's just sudden. And this book happened to come along my way when my husband and I were in a cafe in the mountain town of Bir, and we picked it up from the cafe bookshop. And as I started reading it, certain words kind of flew into my mind. From this, it was the most, shall I say, essential words which flew up, and that's how I started the book. So I will read some of the favorite poems here. But Mani, may I ask you?
Tagore or yours?
Mine,
Okay.
mine. If you don't mind, I'd like you, Mani, to read the last. I mean, my words do come from Tagore, so I hope you understand.
You know, there's
It is a tribute.
the other form, we talk about erasure,
Yeah.
where you take a work and you erase certain parts of it, and what's remaining is what gives you like a different insight into it.
Yeah.
But this actually, I remember you have said in a conversation before, this is not erasure, right? In fact, I think you've done more than erasure.
Thank
Knowing your work
Thank you.
from Andal and various other, Manika Vachikar also, I think I've read something
Yeah.
that you've written. The whole idea of Akkam and Puram, the inner art, I think seems to have some kind of repetition in your works. It keeps coming out. You look at something and you sort of dive into what you want to catch in it. And you know, this is also, now I'm really digressing.
Yeah.
But this is, you know, sometimes, you know, you understand a person based on what they choose to write about. You have chosen to translate Andal. You've chosen to translate Manika Vachikar. And then Tagore, you know. So there is definitely some kind of stream that you're driven in that direction. You know, that you're going towards like an inner vision. You're choosing the gurus and the saints or the mystics, you know. Would you comment on it and also read us some fabulous poems, please?
Thank you. I think I mean, a book opens out to you, a work opens out to you as much as you go through it. I don't think I take strong decisions about my work ever, in the sense that I will do this, then that. Things happen. Andal happened because I saw her, I read about her and saw pictures of her as a teen goddess, a teen icon. This Sing of Life happened just by chance, a chance pick. So in that sense, I'm very grateful that these things have happened. But now I think,
yes,
will
Kamila,
you read?
you'd asked me to read this. This is nothing but love. This light, these clouds, this breeze on my forehead, light floods my eyes, bends from above, looks down on my eyes. This is your message.
Thanks, Mani. And I will read the last poem here. But I would like you to remember what you read of Tagore, his most famous song, 35, where the mind is without fear. That's what we learned. And let's remember, through all this sacredness, there is also the secular prayer to the nation, for the nation, for sacredness, for openness and multiplicity, and to be without fear. But keeping that in mind, I'll read my version of his song, 69. The same stream of life that runs through my veins runs through this world. The same life that shoots through dust in blades of grass and breaks into leaves and flowers. The same life is rocked in the ocean cradle of birth and death. My limbs are made glorious by its touch. My pride is the life throb dancing. The same life, the same life, the same life in my blood. Thank you very much.